My, this is gonna be the noisiest day, isn't it? This, I believe, is going to be my first actual post social recording session, I think. Um, as you may be able to hear in the background, everyone's awake already. And I've also not really got much of an idea for what to talk about. I think maybe something along the lines of momentum. Uh, Momentum in a concept of human existence rather than the state of physics. Because a lot of the time people get into the swing of things and they stop questioning why they are where they are and whether or not they have a direct impact on the situation at hand. Because it's a lot easier to just go with the flow, as it were, rather than try and change the way the momentum is swinging. Um, this is the thing that causes people to continue things like majors that they don't necessarily belong in because they are attached to the concept. They're attached to the idea rather than the actual um, belonging in the situation. And this is usually a concept that is applied from metaphysical momentum. Um, People are more willing to accept the devil they know than the stranger that they don't because it's comfortable to have something that's familiar, even if it's damaging. It's more comfortable than the fear of the unknown, oftentimes, because the your brain is one of the most horrifying things in the world. You can come up with all kinds of crazy monsters that shouldn't even be fathomable and will never actually exist except in your mind. um, the human mind is both a blessing and a curse. It can create every anything really. It can create anything from basically. I don't know if you remember if you anyone actually listened to the previous things, but if the if an infant is able to uh, babble every single consonant that has ever or could ever be uttered by a human being, I think that there should be also the ability to analyze each of the sounds and potentially create another language, or perhaps some sort of language that everyone would be able to understand simultaneously, regardless of their native language. um, where was I going before that? Momentum. I got distracted by the background noise. Momentum, belonging, uh, places, things, people. People think that they belong in places that they don't because it's comfortable. Um, Comfort, fear, the unknown. The unknown, the human psyche, the ability to create monsters. This ability to create these monsters from our creative unconscious is also the thing that we use to create every tool that we could ever make. Um, because you're only going to make tools if you acknowledge that there is a problem. Uh, you cannot start coping with a version of reality if it does not have defined parameters. If you can define what the problem is, you can start working towards fixing it. And the unknown is basically undefinable because you will not acknowledge what it truly is. it's hard to do that to something that you, if you don't know what it is. And then nowadays we're starting to comprehend things fourth dimensionally. We're trying to comprehend a time frame on top of the where, not just the where, but the when. So, fourth dimensionally speaking, anything could be anything else at any given time. Because time is a flow, time is constantly in flux, but we, as third dimensional beings, can only move forward through time. A fourth dimensional being is what we would consider omnipresent, omniscient, because it can view and theoretically move through time in both directions and at an accelerated or decelerated speed. Imagine you're able to drive a car. We are only really able to comprehend where it is when it exists, where it exists. If you were a fourth dimensional being, or if you were able to travel through the fourth dimension, the car would, in a manner similar to the what's his name? Schrodinger's cat. Simultaneously, the cat is both alive and dead because, given enough time, the cat could die. The same concept is true for this car. Given enough time, the car could exist anywhere. Therefore, it could also exist nowhere. So if you're a fourth dimensional being, you could theoretically manipulate the car to be anywhere or nowhere, and any win or no win. The only problem is we have hard times accepting things that are different from our view of the world. Because it's hard to comprehend something that has never been, as far as you can explain it. It's the concept of things like time travelers. If you look at past history records and you see people that are in locations that they shouldn't have been able to be, it's either a theory that they are not actually human or they are a fourth dimensional traveler, because if a person several thousand years ago has technology that they shouldn't exist for thousands, maybe millions of years, depending on what your perspective of reality is, then it's just kind of unsettling. I feel like I've gotten off track. Momentum. I'm the one who's losing myself in the momentum at this point. But it's hard to focus with background noise. This is why I need to do this more, so I can get the ability to express myself more readily. I feel like I've run out of ideas, which is weird. I guess I'll just sit here and ramble about nothing. I don't really want to talk politics, because politics are something that are in a constant state of flux. There's not really something tried and true about it, as opposed to philosophy, which is one person's viewpoint, which can be changed. Philosophy is often hard to change, but not necessarily impossible. But it's also because it's based off of questions that are theoretically impossible to answer. So in one's frame of time, it would make the most sense to be willing to understand multiple different viewpoints on the subject if you wanted to properly comprehend it, and therefore potentially be able to eventually answer a question. Like the concept of fourth dimension is the inability to ask even questions, not even answer them, but we don't have the ability to comprehend the what, so we can't possibly answer why not, or anything else if we can't comprehend what. All these different questions, but you can't really put them into words, because you would have to have the ability to express things in a way that we haven't had to think about before. And not only that, but shut up, crow. In a way that you would have to be able to be like a genius that could make a layman able to understand something in very simple terms. But how do you explain that time is an artificial concept and only flows one way from only our perspective to somebody who doesn't even care? The question ends up not even mattering to someone. Because it's this is outside of their scope of the world. The world doesn't really. It's like people say ignorance is bliss, and I can totally understand because there's all these questions that will never be answered, or at least not in my lifetime, or theoretically the lifetimes of anyone that I even know or can possibly know, because they're questions that would require a more fundamental understanding of the world than we can even comprehend. It's like, what is life? Why? What is sentience? Well, those are simple questions with incredibly complex answers, and the answers vary from person to person. Um, I don't think. I think life is what it is for everything that experiences it differently, and I think that that's what creates the value between different human perspectives. Is the fact that they exist makes them inherently worth something. It's like I'd written down something earlier about art. What makes art special to me is that it's a certain je ne sais quoi about the encapsulation of a very specific frame of time. The emotions that you're trying to convey are important and arguably impressive. They're important to you, and you're trying to impress them upon somebody else. It's basically a coalescent or compressed or crystallized version of time, a figment, a physical manifestation of the ability to record something. That's what art is. I had written it as it is a monument to your experiences that life has brought you. A monument. Monumental. The concepts are hard to fathom in specific ways because these words, they mean different things to different people, but their core is very much the same. The ethos, the ideology. It's you try and explain what a word means to somebody, and they can only understand if they relate it to something else that they can comprehend, right? That's how language is more or less formed. Is it's a basis of it's trying to equate an emotion to a word or something along that lines. You're basically trying to express a concept. Yeah? You're trying to express a concept in a way that other people can agree upon it. So this is why the most thorough works are the ones that end up speaking the most to people, because it's easier to establish a world if you have more fleshed outness to it. But the only problem is, even then, it's not like you can share the vision that's in your mind truly unless you were a perfect artist, and there is no such thing. And then there's also people that would argue that the less fleshed out an object or art piece is, the more it can resonate with people because they can fill in the blanks. They can make it into whatever they want it to be. I can see the merit in that, but I disagree because that's not what that is what art is to some people, but that's not what it is to me, because in my opinion art is very many things to many people, yes, but I believe it is meant to, like I said earlier, capture time. It's meant to express your emotions. It's meant to help people understand. There's certain things. You go through life and you experience these different things, and the reason that you can understand is because you've gone through something and you can relate that to something else. The other reason that you can understand a stage play where there's tragedy is because every human is capable of understanding tragedy. Uh, and the reason that tragedy is then linked to comedy is because most comedy, the only way you can really laugh at something is if you have an understanding of tragedy. Without tragedy, there I don't feel there would be the ability to have comedy, because we try and laugh at the things that scare us the most, and the things that tend to scare us the most are the unknown, and the most unknown of all is death, which is why we try and make up different stories for how it could be and what it is, or what a lot of people think it is. But that's not, I don't feel that that's how proof works. Just because you have a convincing story and everyone believes it, argumentum ad populum, just because everyone believes something does not mean that it is true. But there's a very subtle distinction between the truth of the people or the truth of what is actually the truth. It's a question of how much it ends up mattering. What difference does it make in a truth that everyone agrees upon but isn't true, versus a truth that is the truth that only one person knows? That one person could be the smartest person in the world, but if they can't eloquently explain their situation, and even if they can, and people just don't accept it, what does it end up meaning? What is the point of that? The smartest person in the world could be the quietest. The smartest person in the world could be completely mute and unable to function. Thankfully, we have technology to get around this sort of thing. So we have had, rest his soul, Stephen Hawking, and people of that nature, that caliber, trapped in their own bodies in such enough time that they have one or two faculties left to them, and it is then afforded that they have much more time to focus on the things that are relevant to them in their specific frame of reference. Uh, you give a physicist the ability to just do nothing but think, and he's going to come up with some really crazy concepts. And there's a duality to insanity and genius. A lot of people would say that most of the important geniuses are also insane, but what really is sanity when it comes down to it? Is it normalcy? Because if it's normalcy, that would be quite boring, I believe. If everyone were normal, quote unquote. Well, that's also impossible if you think about it. Every society's norms are different. Their norms and their mores. You could have been born into a society that didn't accept your ideology. That doesn't mean you're not accepted anywhere. It means you're probably just accepted in a different society. The question is whether or not you're able to get out of your society, and or whether or not your society can still benefit from the ideologies from a different society and would be more or less likely to accept them because this is an ideology applied from the inside rather than what is apparently from the outside. Nationalism, in a way, is something that people are proud of their nation. I can appreciate that. Some people are more nationalistic to the point where they would not accept the opinion of a different nation, which is alright, whatever. But they would be willing to accept the idea of a different nation if it came from within their own nation. Kind of a weird perspective, if you think about it. I think everyone has room to learn. I think nobody should stop learning. I think nobody should get complacent. There's no such thing as one person who is the best at anything, and even if somebody is the best at what they do, if they get complacent, they will no longer be the best, because somebody else will be hungrier than they are. Somebody else will want it more than they do. This is why reigning titles don't reign for very long. It's because people get their shot at fame, and then They just let it die.